I'm Phil Rickaby, and I've been a writer and performer for almost 30 years. But I've realized that I don't really know as much as I should about the theatre scene outside of my particular Toronto bubble. Now, I'm on a quest to learn as much as I can about the theatre scene across Canada. So join me as I talk with mainstream theatre creators you may have heard of and indie artists you really should know, as we find out just what it takes to be Stageworthy. If you value the work that I do on Stageworthy, please consider leaving a donation either as a one-time thing or on a recurring monthly basis. Stageworthy is created entirely by me, and I give it to you free of charge with no advertising or other sponsored messages. Your continuing support helps me to cover the cost of producing and distributing the show. Just 4 people donating $5 a month would help me cover the cost of podcast hosting alone. Help me continue to bring you this podcast. You can find a link to donate in the show notes, which you can find in your podcast app or at the website at stageworthy.ca. Now, on to the show. The months of November and December are when a lot of the festivals on the Canadian Fringe circuit hold their lotteries. And a bunch of performers just found out which festivals they'll be performing at this summer. I thought it might be fun to sit down with a number of Fringe performers and talk to them about the shows that they will be bringing to festivals near you. Also in this conversation, seasoned touring artists join artists that are newer to touring and share what it's like fringing across Canada. Joining me are Keith Brown, Jess Gorman, Tim Murphy, Sarah Ivanco, Kendall Savage, Georgia Findlay, and Evan Bawtinheimer. Here's our roundtable discussion. All right, I want to thank you all for joining me. All of you are artists who have almost, for some of you, just found out that you are part of the Fringe Festival, some Fringe Festival on the Canadian Fringe Festival circuit. We have a number of them, a number of you. I want to thank you all for joining me. So I want to start, I'll call each of you. If you don't mind, I would like you to tell me a little bit about who you are, what show you are going to be presenting at a Fringe Festival. Some of you may have more knowledge about that than others because it is early days as far as that goes. And what Fringe Festival or festivals that you'll be attending. I'm going to start with first person to my right with Evan.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me, Phil. My name is Evan Bawtinheimer. I'm a bipolar playwright from Toronto, Ontario. And the only Fringe Festival that I intend on going to as of right now is the Toronto Fringe Festival. I have a TYA play, a theater free audience play called Patty Picker. It's about a high school student who is just living her ordinary life until her deep, dark, secret shame becomes public to everyone in the school. She picks her nose.
Thank you for that. We'll come back to that. Keith, tell me about who you are in your show and what Fringe festivals that you're going to.
Sure. My name is Keith Brown. I do a magic and storytelling show. Right now I'm in the Saskatoon Fringe, and that's the first time I will ever have done that festival is this summer. This summer is also my 10th year touring in a row. And I'm going to be in a bring your own venue in Edmonton. I'm exploring Winnipeg, and we're waiting for the rest.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Tim.
Yeah, I'm just doing Ottawa Fringe next year. I've been doing Fringe for a long time, but I have twin girls now, and so I can only do so much, happily. My show is Babylon. I did it maybe 4 years ago, but I'm rewriting it. The tagline is "Talking is easy until it's with someone you love," and it's pretty much a love letter to my parents, with a side of a lot of cheesy breakup ballads, attachment theory, and lessons from my roommate at a mental health ward, who at the time was an active member of parliament.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Sarah.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name's Sarah Ivanco. I use she, they pronouns. I am a producer, performer, and creator with Trip the Light Theater Collective. This year we'll be going to Montreal Fringe, Ottawa Fringe, and Winnipeg Fringe, which is very exciting. It's our first kind of little tour as a collective. We just started doing Fringe last year. And so our big show that we're doing is called Nui. It's a devised dance theater piece that follows 4 queer characters nightclubbing. It's a really bright, fun adventure.
Nice. Nice. Jess, please tell me a little bit about your show and about you and about the festivals that you're going to.
Okay. Hi. Thanks for having me. I'm Jess. I've only done Fringe. This will be my 3rd time, but I will be going to the Edmonton Fringe Festival. I did apply for Hamilton as well, so cross our fingers there. I am working on a solo show called Boxed, and this will be my 2nd solo show, but this one is going to be exploring the time I got diagnosed with ADHD. It was a late diagnosis. I'm going to be mixing autobiographical elements, but I really want to explore fiction and get into a different plot than sticking with my own narrative. But the show deals with a character who has packed up their entire house, and they are all done the night before the big move, and they realize that they have forgotten something very important and they need it now, but they can't remember what that is. And now they're faced with the decision of unpacking all the boxes or try and figure out what it is by following a paper trail, so to speak.
So kind of a bit of a mystery.
Kind of my real life.
Kendall, please tell me about you and your show.
Hi, my name is Kendall Savage. I'm currently located in Toronto, but I'll be going to the Montreal Fringe with my show, A Truck Stop Diner in the Middle of Nowhere on the Night Shift. It's a clown show. I'm the former co-creator and artistic director of the Montreal Clown Festival. And it's someone looking for love on the night shift and a lot of Jell-O.
Sorry, I'm stuck on Jell-O, and we will come back to that. We'll come back to that. Georgia, tell me about your show.
Hi, I'm Georgia Findlay. I'm an actor, playwright, and producer. I'm going to be doing a show at the Edmonton Fringe this year. I did Toronto back in 2022, and it will be a remount of the show that I did in Toronto in 2022. It's called Joan and Olivia, a Hollywood Ghost Story, and it is based on the real-life feud between old Hollywood movie stars Joan Fontaine and Olivia de Havilland, who were sisters who had this lifelong rivalry. And I kind of take a supernatural twist and see what they're doing in the afterlife, and if they're up to no good, and they influence some new children who move into their house. So it's a bit of a dramedy. It's got some high personal stakes, but also a lot of sort of quippy fun.
That's great. Okay. There's a couple of things that I want to touch on from a couple of people. Actually, Georgia, I want to ask you about the fact. So the show that you did in Toronto, it was a 4-person cast. A lot of times when people tour, there's a lot of solo performing. There's a lot of maybe 2-person casts. You don't see a lot of 4-person casts, which is not a big group per se, but for a touring show, it's a little bit on the large side. What are your feelings about the logistics of that? And are you frightened? How are you feeling about that aspect of it so far?
Well, I think I might be a little bit naively optimistic. I don't know. I mean, I understand that it is a bit more of an undertaking, and I do think about, if I only had to worry about, 1 plane ticket or 2 plane tickets for me and a stage manager. But something that is very reassuring for me is that when we did the show in Toronto, we had a very successful fundraising campaign. that honestly gave us more than enough to put the show on in Toronto. And I learned a lot from that experience. And I want to take what I've learned in the past sort of 2 years about that as well, and works towards that. And, I've sort of been budgeting how much our flight's going to cost. And I know that they also provide a lot of billets in Edmonton, and a lot of the people that I'm working with know people in Edmonton. So I'm not too concerned about places to stay, at least for the budget. And, we have things like we already have costumes, and a lot of it is already sort of pre-made because the hustle and bustle of frantically writing the show happened in 2022. So now I can really focus on producing and making sure that we can all get there. So I'm feeling optimistic, but check in with me in, 5 months, and maybe I will be singing a different tune, but I feel like we can do it, and I'm excited. And I think it's going to be really fun, a bunch of collaborators who enjoy each other and each other's work. Basically taking time off work, going to a new city, and having like a slumber party every night. So I'm stoked.
Nice. Now, are you working with the same cast as you did when you were doing it in Toronto?
It's a little bit up in the air right now. I have one person who has confirmed that she cannot do it for completely reasonable reasons. And we had a conversation and left on very, very friendly terms. There's no hard feelings at all. But something that I think for me has grown a lot since that first Fringe is I feel like that was a great introduction for me into the vast Toronto theater scene. And I feel like that daunting word, like my network, has grown a lot more. So I already feel like there are people that I can go to who might show some interest. I've already been sort of courting an actor friend of mine, and I'm hoping for the best, but it's an evolving conversation. Right now, it seems like we will be having the same director, but there are definitely shakeups that are going to happen. But I'm kind of excited by that. I think there is something refreshing about seeing something that I wrote through new eyes and how different people might interpret it. So I absolutely loved the work of the first cast, and I'm so grateful for everything they contributed. But if there is a reason that they can't participate, I feel like it's just an exciting new challenge to see what we can make of it this time.
Now, on the flip side of that, Jess, you are going for your first time to Edmonton with a solo show that you're still working on, but you've done some fringes before, but there's something different about this time. What's new about this time? First off, you haven't been to Edmonton before. What else is new for you in this instance?
Well, I find that with my first show, this is step one. I performed that in London and Ottawa, and that was completely autobiographical from beginning to oh my goodness, I can't talk, from beginning to end. With this one, it's not so much that I don't want to present myself on stage. It's that I actually want the challenge of now developing myself as a character and seeing where these stories can go. Because this diagnosis came while I was on maternity leave with my little guy, and it was such a beautiful, wonderful, messy period of my life. There was a lot that I underestimated, like thinking that I could just jump right back into these projects that I love after 3 months, and that was not the case. But being able to explore that more with some fiction is new for me. And instead of taking it purely from a storytelling perspective of, I'm going to tell you little segments and they're all going to tie together nicely, I really want to explore the 5-act play in 60 minutes. So that's relatively new. And to take it to Edmonton, oh my goodness. What was I thinking?
Well, I mean, the other thing is, I think that you mentioned that in previous times when you've traveled, you haven't like done a show, gone by yourself. And this time you're going in without your husband, without your usual support network. You're just going completely solo to Edmonton.
Oh yeah, that's terrifying. We were originally going to frame this as, you know, a family vacation, so to speak, and we were all going to go, but my husband approached me one night and thought, you know, just discussed the idea of me going alone, and I felt guilty for so long. I didn't want to go because I don't want to miss that time with my kiddo. But at the same token, though, I feel like I need this as an artist. I need to have that. I've never gotten that before, to go venture off on my own.
It's pretty exciting. I know that both Keith and Tim have done plenty of going off on their own for their time when they were on the circuit. With Tim, who hasn't, reducing the amount of fringes that you did. But when I was in 2012, when I was on the circuit doing a couple of fringes, you were very heavily into a yearly circuit. And Keith, 10 years on the circuit. What do the two of you have? Do you have advice that you could give to Jess for going in completely solo?
I'll jump in. It's one thing I didn't realize when I started in 2009 is just and I know you've experienced it, I think more so, it's just the community is just, they're so supportive. It's, and I find Edmonton, it's very daunting. But yeah, I mean, from the first night at, what is it? Next Act, I think, right? Is that what it's called? Or then, Steel Wheels and yeah. And I think actually maybe being on your own without your family as a new dad, I think it might be a blessing actually, just that you can just go out at night and seeing other shows and supporting. That's the biggest, is meet as many people as you can. Yeah.
Edmonton will definitely not be a vacation because it is the biggest and you are working and everyone you know will be there and everyone you don't know because you're going to meet them. But like you're all so busy doing the thing that like Edmonton's one of the few times on tour that I'm like, hey, like you're not going to hear from me for the next 2 weeks. Like I'm going to be busy. You're going to have to check my social media to see what I'm doing. Or like we're going to have to connect at the right moment when, I actually have a break and you're not talking to someone about your show and this and that. But also, like, as much of a grind as it can be, Edmonton isn't as big as it used to be since the pandemic. Like, they're not back at 289 shows. They were like 180, 190, which is still a lot, but it's not as much of like, oh my God, I have to talk to more people. I have to do this. I have to do that. And it can be a grind and it can wear you out, but also can be so incredibly rewarding beyond other festivals because it is operating at that level. And they do have a great community where like most artists go to Steel Wheels at night. They also have a late night cabaret that's unlike any other cabaret on the circuit. Montreal is like a close second, in my opinion, that they have similar things going on, but different. But like, you can go see an incredible cabaret show, see stuff with your friends, and there's always things to go see. And yeah, I know we've already talked in private a bunch about Edmonton, and you're welcome to ask me more stuff about that because I have like little ideas for Edmonton, kind of thing. So here's one: is Edmonton has a theater goers club. They have a giant group of people who organize meetups to go see shows year round. But during the Fringe, that's like their Olympics. And before, they would like go to the beer tent, set up a little tabletop, be like, this is the theater goers club. And you just meet there and you drink beer. And then they'd be like, hey, what's the next discount show on? That one, let's go to it. And then they meet there again. So like throughout the day, people come, people go. But you can reach out to them and you can say, hey, I have a show. Would you like 30 tickets to it? And they will fill seats. Like I've given them 30, 40, 50 tickets before. And they're like, hey, can we have some more? And you're like, sure. Especially early on in your run. Like if you want to paper your house one time, these are the people who will help you. And because they're theater nerds and they go to all of the shows, they're going to be walking around talking about your show. So that's like a great partnership that you can make in Edmonton is find someone in the Edmonton Theater Goers Club, or ask me, because I have a person and I always just like connect artists to them, give them some tickets on a day that isn't the greatest or early in your run, and they will go out. I've been doing that for like 4 or 5 years, and it's awesome.
Like, that's brilliant. Just absolutely brilliant that network even exists.
Well, yeah, like Edmonton also has the pump up the volume, the comp tickets that they're like, you can give these out, and like I give one to you, and then you buy 2 tickets, whatever, it's a deal. But you have to find those people. You talk to one person and they bring 30 people to your show. It's like, it's a no-brainer to me. It's so much less effort than a lot of the marketing and hustling. And then you have a bunch of people talking about your show.
Kendall, I'm going to go to you because, I mean, first off, you've got a whole lot of exciting stuff coming up. You know, being back in Montreal, which is sort of your clown heart, being at the head of that, the Clown Festival there for so long. In addition to, you've been touring a very successful turn to
Act.
your hot dog act, where you have been. I mean, you've done it in Vegas, in New York. You're shortlisted for the Absinthe show at Caesar's Palace to do it there. So I have 2 questions.
Not to do the hot dog act.
No, not to.
I mean, just to make that clear, for the character of Wanda, I'm shortlisted. I actually have to retire the hot dog act for reasons that I'm not allowed to share. For those of you who don't know, I have a very notoriously fantastic hot dog act where I serve hot dogs out my vagina. And that it's a little out of context. I have been toying with the idea of doing it for the very last time at one of the midnight shows at Montreal. So it's going to be really special. But
so the question that I have for this show in Montreal, is there anything you would tell us about what Jell-O has to do with this show?
I don't want to give it too much away. It's still, the show is still in process of being created with my director Jed Tomlinson from the clown duo Sizzle and Spark, award-winning clown show duo. I have one of my hobbies is the passion for aspics. So aspics is any kind of vintage food that's been gelatinized. So because the show takes place in like a 1970s truck stop diner at about 3 a.m. in the morning, I'm just trying to include her world that we're creating on stage, time-related, era-themed recipes in the show, in that, and Jell-O, naturally, because of my passion for aspic recipes, was at the top of my list to use.
As a child of the 70s, who grew up in the 70s, I do recall everything being in Jell-O at some point. So every kind of food that you can imagine went into Jell-O, and it was disgusting.
Yeah. That's great.
Sarah, you in this, as far as the group here goes, I think you're the only person doing a primarily dance physical show. Which festivals are you doing?
So we are doing Montreal, Ottawa, and Winnipeg.
Nice. Okay.
Which is going to be a lot, but it's going to be really fun.
Wait, Montreal and Ottawa? Because those two...
yes, they overlap.
They can overlap. I knew somebody last year who had to drive from Montreal to Ottawa to do their show in Montreal, drive to Ottawa to do their show, and then go back to Montreal. That's a big thing. How many people are in your cast?
4. So we have a 4-person cast, and then we have our stage manager and director that come with us. So it's a big group of us, but it's a lot of fun. But luckily, we are Ottawa based. So a lot of us have gone back and forth to Montreal, and it's not too big of a deal. But we are super excited to bring Nui back. We did it at Ottawa Fringe and Guelph Fringe last summer. But but yeah, it's dance theater is a bit odd. Like there is a lot of like movement based and physical theater within it, and there are specific just solely dance numbers. But we have a lot of like just dialogue scenes. We have musical scenes. We have scenes where it's just regular dialogue and we are walking but doing really weird movement at the same time while having this conversation. Um, I really like it. It's a really dynamic like art style. It's not something I had done before. I've only about like 2 years into it at this point. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I'm very excited to be bringing it to so many cities this summer.
Nice. Is this your first time doing a tour of any size?
I would say depends what you constitute a tour. Last summer it was only 2 fringes, and one of them was Guelph, which is fairly small. It's only about 4 days, but it's lovely, lovely community Guelph Fringe. I cannot hype them up enough. But yeah, this will be like our first big tour.
Nice. I personally consider anytime you leave your home city to be a tour.
Yeah.
So that's one city, that's a tour. Evan, I think that you were the only person in the group that is doing a theater for young audiences show, and you're doing that at the Toronto Fringe at the Kids Fringe there. What's your Fringe history like as far as like producing shows at Fringe festivals?
This is the first play I will have done ever since graduating university of any capacity, of any kind. I have not done anything in the last 10 years but read and write. So in terms of my first Fringe, this is my first thing.
Okay, big deal, big deal. Congratulations on that. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to ask you, what was the impetus for submitting this show, to try to do this show?
Well, about 6 months ago, I got into contact with a local TYA touring company, and we just hit it off. And I said, I would love to write something for you. And so I came up with a first draft in about 48 hours, and they said they loved it. And it was a really easy, because like once I knew that TYA touring shows have to be small cast, low budget, touring friendly, under 45 minutes, and really like simple and dialogue based, everything just clicked, and I was able to come up with a script really quickly. And I've been working on it for the last few weeks, and I eventually spoke to the AD there and said this would make a great Fringe show, so I applied to Toronto Fringe.
Nice. Okay. Last couple of people that I haven't really talked to about their shows. Tim, your show, you're sort of doing like the Ottawa Fringe rather than the epic tours that you once did. As far as like your what's your history with Ottawa Fringe? Is that like coming home for you? What's your history with that festival?
Yeah, I first was 2009. At that point, I was teaching overseas in Kuwait and would come home in the summer, and then later on in Toronto. But I think I've done Ottawa Fringe 5 or 6 times now with 3 of my shows, and a few. Blind to Happiness I've done 3 times actually over the years, because I kind of revamped it in 2016 from 2009. So I've done Ottawa. I've been lucky with the Ottawa. Well, the first 2 times I did BYOB, but other than that, lucky in the lottery. Yeah. And it's nice to be, I've been home for 4 years now back in Ottawa. So it's nice to be back performing regularly at the Ottawa Fringe. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Keith, as far as you are doing, as far as you're doing one Fringe festival this summer. No, you're doing Edmonton. You're doing are you doing it at the French school, or is it a different video? Yeah.
So I got pulled in Saskatoon for the first time, and I'm going to be in the French Quarter Hub, which is run by John Patterson. And I'm going to be in Campus St. John, which is across the street from like Looney Theater and La Cité Auditorium, where that like half circle shaped building is.
Yeah.
I'm in like the school across the street. They have a nice auditorium there that's a little bit bigger. And yeah.
If you're doing 2 Fringes, is this a small tour for you? Is this smaller than what you would normally do, or is that? And of course, it's just the luck of the draw, right? And that's the thing.
It's very stupid that we have a business plan that relies off of someone pulling your name out of an actual hat. And like, congrats on getting in Toronto. 800 people apply, 80 to 90 get in.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it's not like the odds are in your favor, but they're meant to be there that way, right? So yeah, I didn't get into Edmonton, and I've done BYOV before, as well as like that's actually what I did my first year there, and took all my Winnipeg money and kissed it goodbye. But now I've been enough that people will come see the show, which is nice, and it's worth taking that extra risk. But yeah, I'll be in the French Quarter for Edmonton. But part of it is because of it is the draw. Like I think the most, I'm looking it up, is what I'm doing right now, is the least I've ever done is one in a summer. And that was the pandemic year. Like that was 2021, because Edmonton was like the only festival doing stuff. Beyond that, I think 4 is the smallest number, and then the most is 7 in a summer. So yeah, this is like a smaller tour, as well as I really want to hit 5 this summer, because that'll bring me to 50 festivals. So I'm like, I was like, it would be real nice to hit 50 on your 10th anniversary of touring. But yeah, we'll see what the lottery gods have in store for me.
Absolutely. I think, Evan, you had something that you wanted to say.
Yeah, I do agree completely with what Keith says about the hat-based fortune of your of the lottery. That being said, the Toronto Fringe did something very particular this year that I thought was quite interesting. For anyone who applied to Toronto Fringe this year, you could apply to the general lottery, the Ontario, the national lottery, the international lottery, and then they have subsections for demographics. But there was like the dance one, and then there was one specifically for TYA, specifically for teens TYA, specifically for, I think there's one for BIPOC as well. So while there was like 800 or so people who applied it generally for Ontario, I applied for the Teens Fringe, Teens TYA Fringe. Do you know how many people applied for the Teens TYA Fringe?
Not a lot.
9.
Okay.
Do you know how many people from that 9 got in? 4.
The
And
odds are
5
pretty
on the
good
way.
for that one.
Mhm.
Odds are
So
pretty
if you
good for
had
that
a
one.
Teens Toronto play, your odds were 1 in 9 of getting it.
Their
Which
category,
I think is interesting.
they also do have the diversity lottery, where they're having anyone from a minority like be chosen first.
Yeah.
And then after they have 50% goes towards this marginalized community lottery. And then once they do that 50% of the slots available, then they throw everyone's names in.
Yep.
And Toronto also doesn't have a local category. Ontario is their local category, because people would use their grandma's address in Hamilton and get a second application in and things like that. So to get around that, they're like, hey, everyone in Ontario gets to apply, kind of thing. But yeah, they have some interesting categories like
Over
senior.
65. Yeah. Over 60.
Yeah. They had International 60, National 60, Kids Fest Teen, General 90, Ontario, which included Dance Senior, and Ontario 60.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Now, Keith, you bring up a very interesting point about keeping about a business plan that relies on essentially chance. There are 2 reasons to do Fringe. Number 1, you would like to get your work seen. Number 2, you would like to not go bust. You would like to make some money. You're probably not going to make a lot of money, but you would at least like to break even, which is hard to do with a business plan if you're not sure what your if you're even going to get into fringes and things like that. In Europe, they do it a different way, where you apply to a venue and you pay the venue. Although a lot of times people will say that the only people who make money in those fringes, especially say, for example, the Edinburgh Fringe, are the venues. So there's like there's a bit of a give and take there. Do any of you see a better way than the lottery for selecting Fringe, or is lottery basically, I think, the most egalitarian thing that we have?
I guess the better question is, how would you choose?
Yeah, like one of the tenets of Fringe is that it's uncensored, like it's raw,
Yeah.
uncut kind of thing. So
Yeah.
they don't go, hey, we like you, we don't like you, we like you, we don't like you. Whereas the like Edinburgh, Australia, Hollywood Fringe, those venues curate themselves, and you're like, hey, I'll pay you for a show a day, and I want 7 o'clock or I want 9 o'clock. You have the same time slot
Right.
the entire month, and those festivals are massive. Whereas the Canadian ones, like there's there's there is like a magic to having your name drawn. I'm like, oh my God, I got in. There are also ways around that, like bring your own venue, where you find your own venue and you show up anyways. And not everyone has that. Like Toronto has the unconventional spaces, which is more, hey, my show can't be in a theater. It has to be in this bar, and here's why, or whatever the site specific thing is. But that's part of the beauty of it, is that there are people that you're like, oh my God, like there are people like Mike Delamont and Chase Padgett that are up there who are, or who have massive draw, who do Mervish, who you're like, why don't I see you on TV kind of thing, that they might not be there the next year. But you also have the person who is their first time doing the Fringe, and they get a shot and they get a crack at it, and they get to produce their show for a small amount than they would normally independently. And the Canadian ones, there's something special of like, hey, you get a noon, you get a midday, you get a 5, you get a late night, like you get a prime time. So like it is pretty equal all the way through, and you're going to get stuff that's great and stuff that's complete garbage, but everyone deserves a crack at it. So yeah.
Sorry, I just think it's interesting in the sense of when it comes to how many people now are involved for shows and how they're chosen. There also used to be off fringes that would sort of tag on to the fringes, which I thought were pretty magical. And I don't know about all the fringes, but Montreal had this wild off fringe where anything went, and it wasn't part of the fringe. It was like the anti-fringe. And as I recall, years ago, Toronto had something similar. So you'd be going into these teeny tiny people's apartments where they had pushed all the furniture away, and you'd see this one woman show, and it would be fantastic. And I think it would be a lot more magical if some of those sort of events came back too. And that would give people more opportunity to perform maybe some a little more interesting things too.
Yeah. Toronto did used to have BYOVs in the same way that Montreal and a lot of and Edmonton, a lot of other fringes had. This is like maybe 15 years ago or more. They hated it. They hated the idea of somebody being able to pay to perform, to skip the line. At least that's the reason they give. Although they have had shows that they sponsor and do a fundraiser with, and they're not always upfront with what those shows are. So those people get like a prime shot into prime space when that occurs. But they did used to do it, and then they decided they wanted to go for something more like what they do now, which is the site specific fringe. Again,
not easy. I sorry, but I tried to apply for a site specific last year or the year before, because I have several plays written in the back of a car. And they don't make site specific easy at all to get into. It's shockingly difficult. And I think it takes, I don't know, I'm a bit of a anarchist in the sense that I want to see theater not just in theaters. Like Montreal a couple of years ago had a food truck pull out, and there was a puppet show, and they let someone do their show out of a food truck, which I thought was incredible. I want to see some more interesting stuff. I want to see a show in the back of someone's 1959 Nash Metropolitan car, which is what I wrote. I don't know.
Orlando has had a bunch of shows in cars, so I think that's the city you got to do it in. I also do know with Toronto and their venues is they get a lot of grant money, whether that's municipally, provincially, or federally, to make the venues accessible. So any fringe proper venue must be fully accessible, and that includes washrooms. Otherwise, they won't put a show in there. And a lot of BYOVs, it's like, hey, this is a great spot, but there's stairs. It's not accessible, and they want to be more inclusive, and they have put a lot of work into their accessibility in the last few years, which I do really, really like, because not every festival provides you with those resources.
No, and one of the things I remember a couple of years ago at the Winnipeg Fringe, they had their big awards. The Jennies occurred at a space that was not accessible. That happens upstairs. Big awards, I know it's not really that. It's like you get a donkey, but it was upstairs, and that was not an accessible space. So there were people who couldn't access it. As far as for those of you who are not what I would call who might be Fringe veterans, if it's your first time sort of like going out on your own, what is the thing that scares you the most right now? What is it that I mean, it can also be exciting because it's exciting too, but like it can be frightening. I know I am terrified of Edmonton as far as a performance thing. So those of you who are going to Edmonton, good for you. But as far as what you are nervous about or frightened of, tell me what are those things?
I can say it right now. There's not a day that goes by where I don't say, I made the biggest fucking mistake of my life. What have I done? Oh my gosh. Like, I was in Home Depot when I found out that I got drawn, and my face of shock was so many emotions. But besides from coming to a whole other city I've never been to, I work from home, but my work is primarily in Edmonton. So I'm excited to go see a city I've never seen, but work out of. It's also, I mentioned this to Keith, actually. Keith and I was very generous with his time and giving me some advice about it, but it was how am I going to keep up with this tiny little solo show that's half fiction, half autobiographical, while not getting lost in the crowd? And how am I going to market this thing and make it interesting enough? Because I've done the solo show before, and the question that gets asked through my own work is, why this show? Why should somebody come and invest an hour of their time to see you? What is it about you that's interesting? And I think getting caught in that cycle is vicious, and it can be a hindrance to your work, because then you start asking, is this interesting enough? Is it interesting enough? And you don't need to keep asking yourself that. I think if me as the performer, if I find it interesting, then I hope that by sharing that, it makes it interesting. So I think that's my overall fear, is getting caught up of if I'm interesting enough.
I'm going to encourage Evan. Evan, I think that you sort of feel along the same lines as Jess. What are your feelings about being a first time doing something first time at Fringe?
I have an inflated sense of self-esteem regarding my work, so I do not have that kind of sense where I am like I feel good about my work. I've been working at this for about 10 years. My concern is similar to Jess's in the sense of I'm worried that this might be the biggest mistake that I've made, because all I have is a script. I literally have nothing else, and I have no one else. I have no team. I have no performers. I have like 3 people who've read the script, say it's good, and that's it. I've paid my participation fee, so I'm in this. I have no intention of performing. I have no intention of reading this. I wrote this I would love to give this to 2 young women out of theater school who want to perform, and 1 young woman who wants to direct, because it is like low budget, like regular costumes, a couple of props, and it's really quick, and it's a really good challenge, I think, for a performer. But I know no one, and especially now, as we're recording this podcast, it's December 18th, and I have 7, 8 months to get people to commit to that timeline is so difficult. And that's just for Toronto. If I wanted to apply to a Fringe out of the city I live in, that's next to impossible, because I know no one. The Hamilton Fringe is open. I got an email just this morning from Eventron saying the Hamilton Fringe is open. Will you? I think we all got that email. Will you apply? And my answer is a swift no, because I don't know anyone there. And even though the project that I have, it travels really light. three people could get into a car and go anywhere with this show. It is so incredibly tourable and fringeable, but I don't know anyone. That's my biggest fear, is that in the 7 months that I'll be I'm asking coworkers if they can help me with this. I'm pulling every favor in my hat from everyone who I've met in the last 10, 15 years to say, I'm finally doing this. Can you help me? And it's whether or not it adds up.
But
my work is great. My work is fantastic.
that is the essence of Fringe. I have a script and I need some people to do it. Sarah, a question for yes. Sorry, go ahead, Kendall. Or
I would love to read your script. If you want to send it my way, we can exchange emails, and I'll see how I can help you. If you're interested.
Awesome.
Also,
very much.
Toronto Fringe has like a board of people. So if you're looking for a videographer, a stage manager, an actor, they have like an index of people in the community that you can reach out to. You could also, there's going to be like a Toronto Fringe participation group. There's also other Facebook groups like Beyond the Fringe, where artists talk about festivals outside of those festivals. As well as you're both like, hey, what if this is the biggest mistake I've made? But what if it's the best fucking thing you ever did, right? As much as you might fall on your face, what if you fly? What if you fly, right? You have no idea what could happen or what you will make happen. And do you need all those people? Probably not. You already made the show by yourselves. So anytime you do have that doubt creeping into you, one thing that I've learned is that only highly qualified people experience imposter syndrome. So if you're questioning yourself, you're smart enough to not be the bottom of the barrel who's so dumb that they are just like the blind confidence, right? So it means like you're human, as well as if you weren't afraid of this thing, that means you don't give a shit. And if you don't give a shit, why are you doing it? Because you care. You care about this work. You care about putting it in front of other people. You care about what they think and what's going to happen with it. So like use that. Use that to put more work in and to talk to more people and find the people in your community who can make it happen for you. So like sometimes you got to tell that voice in your head to fuck off, and you do it anyways and you see what happens. As well as like it probably won't be your best the first time round, but if you keep showing up, you're going to get better and better and better and better. And those people are going to remember you and be like, hey, I saw their show last year. They were funny. They were this, they were that. I'm going to give them my money again, and I'm going to tell friends about it.
I'm going to usurp the roundtable for a quick second to tell my Keith Brown story.
Oh no!
So this was last summer. We have a mutual friend, Carlin Ramey.
Yes.
We went to go see your show, and it was a great show. It's fantastic. I'm a magic person. It's wonderful to see your show. So you did a fantastic job. But what I loved more about the show was the inspiring messages that you pepper in throughout the performance, especially one that you did about the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Was it New Zealand?
Oh, Iceland. Yeah.
Iceland. Sorry, but that's a story within a story. But you basically said the message where it's like, if you want to do something, go for it, because the worst thing that could happen is it doesn't happen. But if it does happen, imagine if it does. So after your show, I went for a drink with Carlin, and I thought about what you said for a very long time. And I literally asked her, I have a show I want to write. I don't know where and I don't know why, but I want to write it. It's about a little girl who picks her nose and gets ostracized for it. And she's like, you should write that show. And so I held in the back burner. I'm like, oh, maybe not. And the opportunity came up, so I wrote it. And that's the show that is going to Fringe this summer. And it's because you inspired me to write that play.
Nice.
Well, you're welcome. I was going to say thank you for that nice comments you said about me, but I guess you're welcome. And
so it's also your fault.
I'm so sorry that you got dragged into all this, and for all of the pain and suffering you're about to endure.
Yes. So I blame you and only you for everything that is about to happen.
I want to jump in because I want to get to a couple of other people. Sarah, I wanted to point out the fringes that you are doing. You're doing Montreal, Ottawa, and Winnipeg. So as far as the fringes go, you're kind of going to little fringe, massive fringe. Have you been to the Winnipeg Fringe before?
Nope, first time.
Okay.
Yes, we only started doing Fringe last year. I am like very, very new to this.
Now, when you applied for the Winnipeg Fringe, did you know about its size? Were you prepared for that? Okay.
Oh, we knew.
Okay.
Yeah, we had friends who did it last year, and we've known a bunch of people who've done it. So we were very well aware of what we were getting ourselves into. But yeah, getting a 6 people from Ottawa to Winnipeg is gonna be a lot. But we're really, really excited, and we've met a lot of people in the Fringe community, even just from doing it last year, that have given us wonderful advice for going to a big Fringe. And our director, her name is Sophie, is probably the most marketed-minded person I've ever met in my entire life, and it's very in your face about it. So I'm very happy to have her on our team for definitely that part of Winnipeg Fringe. But yeah, very excited, but pretty nervous on the same end of things.
I want to jump over to Kendall for a second before I jump over to Georgia and Tim. Kendall, you are essentially going home for this festival. You are returning to Montreal after living in Toronto for a few years. What does coming home to the Montreal Fringe with this new clown show mean to you?
Well, it's fantastic. I have no idea how excited I am because the clown community themselves haven't really seen me perform. I stopped performing clown to focus for many years on the festival. And the last time I really performed clown in Montreal was, at least the full show was 2013 or 2012. Goya Made Me Cry, my award-winning clown show at the Montreal Fringe. And then I went off to do my master's degree in clown in Edmonton, and then came back to Montreal and pretty much started producing and stopped performing. So I'm really excited to be returning as a performer and not as a producer. Like, I can't begin to tell you, it's magical. It's going to be magical. And I'm very fortunate that I already have like a huge community coming out to see the performance because they're also curious. And I'm counting. The show's not ready, but by any means, it's kind of got written a little on paper. So it's going to be really exciting, and I can't wait. I can't wait to go home.
What does the Montreal Fringe, not just Montreal, but the Fringe itself in that city mean to you?
To me, it means a really supportive, wonderful, safe place for people who may not often have the opportunity to perform. Like, Fringe itself is so vital, in my opinion, because sometimes it's the only performance someone might do for the entire year. And that sort of cathartic experience is what feeds the soul. Like, if I performed once a year, I'd be grateful. I'd be performing at all, probably. But my soul wouldn't be fed. So if someone doesn't have the opportunity for the rest of the years to do it, and they venture out and they get in, to me, it's just like this supportive, wonderful community for this healing catharsism that we all need to have.
Nice.
If that made any sense.
Absolutely it did. Absolutely it did. I saw nodding heads. Georgia, you've done, I believe that when you did Joan and Olivia at the Toronto Fringe, it was your first Fringe Festival.
Yeah.
How do you feel about going to the biggest in North America as your next stop with this show?
Excited, nervous. I was not expecting it, obviously. I mean, I think, talking before about the randomness of getting into a Fringe, it's always really exciting. I think I always encourage, like, pretty much everyone I know who has an idea to apply for any Fringes, because what are the odds? I've applied to a bunch more this year, and so far, other than Edmonton, it's all been no's. But I mean, I'm very, very happy I got into Edmonton. But yeah, it's intimidating for sure. But I think a benefit of having done a production of it, like, I have a different kind of nerves, but they're more like, I guess, sort of logistical in the sense of, getting plane tickets for everyone. I think someone mentioned this before, but I think it was Evan actually, getting people to sign on this far in advance, because I have to buy your plane ticket and I can't last minute just switch whose name is on the ticket. So that's something that I'm worried about. But like, I do realize I feel like I have a long time to, before we'll start rehearsing or anything like that. So I've, like I said, I've reached out to the previous team and, I'm just letting them know the offer's on the table, but you have time to get back to me. But it's not infinite time. There is a certain point where I need to know if I have to look elsewhere. But again, that's why I'm so grateful that the person who had to pull out of it was able to tell me in December for an August show. Like, I'm so grateful for that respect and that forethought, because now I can start to brainstorm and start to, sort of court other people and see what's the right fit for this next iteration. But I think one of the biggest advantages is it was an untested show before, and I was an untested writer. I'm a performer first, and it was my first play that I'd written, and I didn't know if people would like it, and from everything I heard and experienced, they did. And now I have the knowledge that there is an audience for this, and that, we have quotes from reviews that we can use in advertising. We have the production stills. We have video of it. We have evidence that this is worth your time. And, as much as it may seem crazy to bring 5 people to Edmonton, that's 5 people who can split up and go around the festival and independently promote it. So it's not just me doing all the legwork, which I really appreciate. I'm not going to ask, everybody to do too much extra work. I am the producer for the show, but, I think I'm going to be spending the next few months just focusing on like marketing and fundraising and grant writing. I've got some fun ideas for fundraiser type things. And, I'm thinking about just writing a lot of the copy ahead of time of ways to advertise the show, so that when we get closer to it, we can just focus on the art and getting there, and then sort of just, message people like crazy. And I don't know anybody in Edmonton personally. I mean, I know of people in Edmonton, but I know people who know people in Edmonton. And so I want to use this time to really pull on my resources. And I think compared to last time, I'm just a lot less scared to do that, because I feel like I have some kind of place in this community now. And it's, again, like anyone saying, you're worried that this was the biggest mistake of your life. I feel like I can almost guarantee that it's not. Like, getting into the Toronto Fringe in 2022 honestly changed my life. I am a completely different artist now, and I feel like it was my way in to my career that the pandemic felt like it had completely cut off. So I'm really excited to be doing it again. I went to the Toronto Fringe for 2023 as a patron, and I went to see 18 shows. I just love it. I love the community. I love the experience. So to get to do that in Edmonton, which is so huge, I just really want to just experience it all. I'm sure I'll probably, get absolutely exhausted, but it's an exhaustion that I very much look forward to.
Every Fringe festival is a roller coaster for the performers. I think years ago, I was doing a couple of cities, and I had a moment in the middle of a Fringe festival where I said to myself, if you don't feel completely demoralized but at some point in the Fringe and feel like a complete failure, then are you really doing a Fringe tour? It happens. It is such a roller coaster. Tim, as somebody who is a Fringe veteran who's done festivals for quite some time, but now you're sort of pulling back. What's your relationship with Fringe like now? Is it something that you look at as something from the past that you do occasionally? Like, what's your relationship with Fringe itself like?
Yeah, it used to be such a big part of my life. Now it's so, I mean, it was really the pandemic that really started it. And so now, I mean, Ottawa Fringe is great. I'll go there, and I go when I don't perform. And now I just live vicariously through everybody. And I'm so happy I can follow a whole new group of friends here. And I mean, I think some of you said it. It changed my life. I know you said, Keith, like, it's dependent on the lottery. I just think the lottery is so beautiful that it gives everyone a chance. And yeah, I love Fringe so much. And I mean, I joke that I'll take Davey and Juniper and my partner Grace on a trip to Edmonton and Winnipeg. We'll see. So I just know I'll continue doing it. I have to rewrite some shows because I've aged myself. I just keep aging the character. But now I'm doing some more storytelling, so that can work. And I have ideas, for new shows. I just think Fringe is beautiful, and I do miss it. But I'm so happy with the life I have now that I wouldn't change it in any way. But I just think I'm so glad it's flourishing again. And seeing so many young people in Ottawa, I was just so amazed at the number of young people, where I just felt when I was there, it was people that were a bit more in the industry, but people just jumping right in and just saying, yeah, let's create a show. And the community that's built, and a lot of us were solo performers, but there's much larger groups. I think there's a new regeneration that's happening. That's really fun to see.
One of the things that I've noticed, and it excites me this year, so I was looking over the names of people who got into, like, the Toronto Fringe, for example. I think there's not a single name that I know from the entire time that I've lived in Toronto and been involved with Fringe and been a Fringe goer. I think there are no names that I know, which is really exciting because that means that a whole lot of new people get to do this festival and to have the Fringe experience. We are almost at the end of our time, because I don't want to take up everybody's time. I know people have lives to get back to. I do want to say thank you to each of you for joining me, and I look forward to talking with you all as we get closer to the festivals themselves. This has been an episode of Stageworthy. Stageworthy is produced, hosted, and edited by Phil Rickaby. That's me. If you enjoyed this podcast and you listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can leave a 5-star rating. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, you can also leave a review. Those reviews and ratings help new people find the show. If you want to keep up with what's going on with Stageworthy and my other projects, you can subscribe to my newsletter by going to philrickaby.com/subscribe. And remember, if you want to leave a tip, you'll find a link to the virtual tip jar in the show notes or on the website. You can find Stageworthy on Twitter and Instagram at StageworthyPod, and you can find the website with the complete archive of all episodes at stageworthy.ca. If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Phil Rickaby, and as I mentioned, my website is philrickaby.com. See you next week for another episode of Stageworthy.